Let's see how the more affordable Redmi K30 Pro matches up against its big brother, the flagship from Xiaomi, the Mi 10 Pro. Both of these phones feature a large high megapixel image sensor under the main camera. Both have an ultra wide, but the Mi 10 Pro adds a big zoom range on top that the K30 Pro just doesn't have. They do, however, use exactly the same processor, the Snapdragon 865. I can see differences in the look, the feel, and the exposure and the colors of the selfie cameras on both of the phones, even though they both come in at a 20 megapixel resolution. The Mi 10 Pro is slightly more pleasing to my eye, and also it does add a 120 frames per second selfie style feature that the K30 Pro doesn't have. Check out images for dynamic range, which may be the biggest difference between the two phones, as they will use a very similar color science. In terms of exposure of the background, the light and dark parts of the image, is there a big difference between the two phones? Clearly not. They are very similar, but I do see some slight differences in terms of how images are exposed. I feel like the K30 Pro just tends to underexpose the darks just a tad more than the Mi 10 Pro. All video on this test was filmed in 4K resolution at 30 frames a second. There's no 24 frames a second option on either of these phones. And when it comes to zoom range for video, I feel like with Xiaomi phones in general, once you get past about 2 times or 3 times zoom, the image tends to fall apart fairly quickly, even in 4K resolution. There is also an 8K resolution on these phones, but I didn't include it in this test because it just becomes a shaky mess. The stabilization isn't that great in there. And I feel like 8K video just isn't ready for prime time yet. Most people are going to do 4K, but in general, 4K looks pretty good in the phones overall. Somewhere where the Mi 10 Pro definitely has an advantage over the K30 Pro is in zoom range from the camera. This is on the main camera on both of the phones, going into a 5 times telephoto zoom and then into a 10 times telephoto zoom, which is the max zoom range of the K30 Pro. The Mi 10 Pro can go into 30 times zoom and at the max end go to 50 times zoom. Shooting photos and video just from the main lens without any zoom range, you're going to get very similar results. It's only when you start zooming in do you find that there might be a slight difference in the quality and the crispness of the image thanks to those optical zoom lenses on the Mi 10 Pro. But the overall look and feel is obviously going to be so similar. They will be using a lot of the same software and color science to process the images. And also, if you want a longer zoom range, you have the K30 Pro Zoom Edition, which does add 3x optical zoom and then up to 30 times with digital. It's very difficult to see, but I feel like the K30 Pro underexposes comparatively to the Mi 10 Pro. I actually don't think that's a bad thing because you get slightly deeper, richer colors like that. I feel it's also proven here with slightly deeper colors on the K30 Pro, but let's switch to the high megapixel mode right here and then zoom in 400% on the image to see some detail. I did look at this under a microscope and I do feel like the Mi 10 Pro kept a little bit more detail in those characters, but it is very, very close. Resolution is only one part of the image though. I feel like the K30 Pro kept better dynamic range in the sky, especially with the sun, and created a better looking image overall than the Mi 10 Pro on this occasion. Here's the stabilization on both of the phones, just walking at a normal pace. They both have optical image stabilization on the main lens. I feel like the stabilization works better when you are stationary to really make a smooth image rather than jumping around or walking around like I was. One of the cool things that Redmi put in the K30 Pro non-zoom edition was this macro sensor, which is one of the best I've seen in any phone. It actually makes macro photography quite fun and interesting. I'm never usually one for macro photography, and I never usually include it in camera tests because I don't think many people are really interested in it. But how close you can get to objects with this macro sensor and the detail that it gives you, I think is really awesome. It actually makes macro photography fun, and it is without a doubt the best macro sensor I've ever seen in a smartphone, making it actually useful and adding to the camera experience overall. It's really weird how Redmi included the macro sensor on the K30 lower version. The Zoom Edition doesn't have that really good macro sensor that is definitely a lot of fun to use. Not even the Mi 10 phones have that same macro sensor. It's not something that I think should really sway you into getting the phone just to take macro shots, but it's definitely a really cool thing, and I've never ever seen a macro sensor that good on any smartphone before. The look, feel, style and colors of the night modes on these two phones is going to be the same because the two phones are from the same company. Both phones take a 2 or 3 second exposure in night mode and give you some really cool looking shots. The Mi 10 Pro has a low light mode, which is basically like an automatic night mode that you can't turn off if it feels like there isn't enough light to take a photo. The K30 Pro doesn't have that feature, so it appears much darker than the Mi 10 Pro, but if we switch to night mode on both of the phones, you can see it becomes much more similar to what the Mi 10 Pro put out. Neither the K30 Pro or the Mi 10 Pro have a night mode on the ultra wide, but you can get some great shots from the main camera for sure. So let me know how you think the more budget friendly K30 Pro lived up in this camera test compared to its more expensive flagship brother, the Mi 10 Pro. Subscribe for all the latest tech news and videos. That's it for now, but I'll see you in the next one.